Okay, hello. Welcome to our TASA Thursday test session today. We're going to be talking about the Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award today. But before we begin, I'd just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. And I'm joining you today from the unceded lands of the Palawa people. I'm really fortunate to live on Kanamalooka land and enjoy the gorgeous Kanamalooka estuary, um, a waterway that has been cared for countless years by the traditional landowners, and that I'm really fortunate to enjoy. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'll extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us or watching um, today. Um, yeah, and just to introduce myself, I am Brooklyn. I am the postgraduate portfolio leader for the remainder of this year. I will be facilitating today's webinar. And I'm really privileged to be joined by Natalie Merryman, who is, I hope I pronounced that all right, great, who is a PhD candidate at the University of New of Newcastle. I'm not speaking so well today. And Natalie was the 2025 winner of the TASA Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award. Yeah, and today's session is just an opportunity to hear a bit about what Natalie does and to maybe think about how we can create social impact and how to make meaningful contributions to our communities through sociology. We'll also, of course, be talking about the award, and about Natalie's application and any tips and tricks for anyone hoping to apply this year. Um, So, in terms of the Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award, it's an annual award that celebrates the outstanding contributions of postgraduate students to Australian society. The award was introduced in 2019 by the Postgraduate Subcommittee at that time in recognition that there aren't really that many awards that specifically recognize postgraduate students, and also to really recognize and encourage contributions that are not just those traditional academic outputs. Um, and this award is based on the Boyer model of scholarship, which highlights four values, and these values are the scholarship of discovery, scholarship of integration, scholarship of application, and the scholarship of teaching. Um, so yeah, the award is really premised on this idea that there are a lot of ways that postgraduate students can and do make really real world contributions, and I guess to sort of push back a little bit against the sort of publish and perish culture of academia, and to sort of say, hey, this isn't the only measure of success or meaningful contribution that we can make. Yeah, and if you are thinking of applying this year, nominations end Friday, May 29th. So you've still got about a month to get your nominations in. Yeah, and I'm really excited to read through the applications this year. Um, so that's the award. Natalie, I think a nice place to start would maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about your PhD.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Brooklyn. I'll just acknowledge too that in the background you can see beautiful Awabakal and Warramai country, where University of Newcastle is situated on the unceded lands there. I'm actually coming to you from Quandamuka country in Brisbane at the moment. That is just my official backdrop, but it is a beautiful location. So I wanted to be able to share that with you. Yes, I'm in the final year of my PhD, and my PhD is looking at the experience of women in the Australian Defence Force as a gendered institution. So I've done qualitative in-depth interviews with around 17 women who served in the Australian Defence Force about their experiences. And those interviews were like quite open with no real expectation of what they might be wanting to share about their experience. A cohort of women in the Defence Force have traditionally been invisible in the veteran space, even in the service, and also silenced, and they don't get much of an opportunity to talk about their experience, and they certainly don't get an opportunity to talk about their experience from a gendered perspective. and in terms of how that might have uh, made their experience different from that of men. So I've sort of taken an approach looking at Grosh and the idea of corporeal gender and looking at the bodily impacts or the impact of women's bodies actually within this really hypermasculine environment and what that means in terms of how they fit and what how their experiences is read through the body and through how they create their narration of that story, of that experience. So that's sort of what my PhD is about. And yeah, so using critical feminist epistemology and yeah, sort of really trying to unpack the institution, which is something that sociology generally, particularly in Australia, has been reluctant to do. The military institution, as soon as you start talking about the military and veterans, people do get this perception that you might be maybe a little bit right wing, maybe a little bit pro war or pro military, when in actual fact, from a sociological perspective, the institution of the military is just another social structure that really needs to have sociological investigation in the same way that all our big institutions or social systems do need to have. And they have this extra level of sort of clandestine nature of what they do, which makes it much harder for civil society to really know or understand what's happening behind the gates. So I think this is important work in trying to maybe break down some of those preconceived ideas about what investigation of the military and people involved in the military really looks like and how that is helpful to our wider society and understanding.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like really important work, Natalie. That's really excellent. Um, Switching gears a little bit, I suppose, how and why do you think sociology is relevant for creating social impact and sort of contributing value to society more broadly?
Um, I probably am preaching to the choir a little
Yeah.
bit. And my confession here is that although I'm doing my PhD in sociology, I don't have undergraduate qualifications in
Mm.
sociology. So it's actually been quite a learning curve for me. I've obviously done some sociology subjects in my undergraduate and master's work, but it's lucky that I love sociology. I love the theory. I've sort of really absorbed it, I'd like to say quite quickly, if not completely. I was reassured at the conference that most people, even really experienced people in this space, struggle with getting their head around all that. So I sort of felt a
Mm.
little bit better about that. But what I think is that sociology brings a capacity to look at problems from a different perspective. And the military is a great example of that. We've had over 50 years, we've had uh, over, oh, I forget the exact number right now, I should know it off the top of my head, dozens and dozens of official inquiries and investigations into scandals, uh, issues of abuse, discrimination, and so forth that have been going on within this institution that sits in our society. In fact, it culminated with a Royal Commission into Defence and Veterans Suicide that concluded last year. Sorry, last year, the year before. So that Royal Commission exposed a culture of abuse within this institution. And so what we're seeing in our society is um, a failure, well, we're seeing in the institution a failure of reforms, attempts at reforms, attempts at changing policy and so forth. And then that obviously has a flow on effect in the wider community as well as the individuals that are involved. What sociology brings to that is an ability to look at why these things might have occurred, not just name them, not just count them, but to ask why does this keep happening and to have a deeper look at the systems, the hierarchies, the power imbalances, all those things that sociology is so good at doing, that gives us such rich information about a big institution, in this case, and how it's functioning to give us answers as to why these other interventions perhaps aren't working. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
That's great. And
yeah.
that really resonates with me as well. That's one of the things that I love about sociology. I love that it sort of illuminates and makes these
Mm.
invisible structures um, visible in a way that other disciplines don't always do, and in a way that I think when we approach problems, we don't always think about those invisible structures. And I just love that sociology is a way to say, to think about it, to say these are the things that are happening, these are the things that we can't see. And I think it's so just, yeah, so important. So yeah, that really resonates with me. Um, so I suppose my next question is sort of about whether in approaching your research and in approaching your PhD, were you sort of always trying to incorporate impact and engagement, or has that been incidental? Has it been something you've planned out, or
It's a
yeah?
really interesting question because the answer is not as clear cut as a yes or no. I guess, and I do find that my position is not very common in that I am part of the community that I'm researching. So I really have that insider outsider thing
Mm,
happening as a person who served in the Royal Australian Air Force myself. I've actually been connected to the veteran space either through my own service, through being a contractor afterwards, through being a spouse of a defence member for 10 years, a parent of a child who was, part of a defence community, and also then, as it turns out, an advocate in the space. I was part of I did some contract work for the Air Force after my discharge that resulted in some very deliberate toxic chemical exposure. So I did get into compensation and helping other people navigate government processes and policies and things about 20 years ago. And that sort of led me sort of into this community that I maybe wouldn't have been part of otherwise. So I've sort of been involved in it for a long time. So when I wanted to sort of explore initially the idea of what's leading to these high numbers of suicide in our community, it was really from the inside that motivation came. But then it also coincided with the announcement of a Royal Commission. So the Royal Commission was going to look at that in a way that I would not be able to do with the resources that they had and so on. So I was encouraged by one of my supervisors to switch gears a little bit and look at the experience of women, which is something I hadn't really considered. And when of course, they suggested it because there's nothing out there, particularly in the
mm,
Australian landscape. So my position in doing this research was that I'm actually writing about and analysing the narratives of people with whom I share that community. So I feel a very deep sense of moral responsibility in how I handle those stories, how
mm,
I write about them, how I present them, and what I do with them, and what impact that will have. There was a lot of trust. I didn't know any of the people that I interviewed. That was one of the criteria in my project, but I still feel a connection to them, and I feel like because I had that insider positioning, that they trusted me in a way that maybe they wouldn't have with someone who was an outsider coming in, doing a research project, and then going away with the data and not actually having ongoing contact in that community. Um, yeah, so the work that I've done that has been about informing policy and having impact has really come from those connections, not the connections with the participants, but the connections in the broader community that I had already established over a long period. So
mm,
when people knew that I was researching and that I was looking at these things, they started asking my opinion. They started inviting me to things. They started reaching out to me, and I deliberately formed connections with people in the space because I wanted to hear more. I wanted to know more. I wanted to not just be confined to small snippets of information because it all helps in the way that you're doing your analysis, right? So I guess I developed very deliberately a network. And so the opportunities came in ways from places that I couldn't have anticipated at the beginning. So it wasn't really a plan, but I guess because I felt a sense of responsibility and I'd been doing advocacy in the space, it was a natural progression.
Yeah, fabulous. I think that's something a lot of people can probably relate to. I think
Mm,
in the social sciences especially, I think a lot of us are doing sort of advocacy sort of
yeah.
PhDs where it's like you do feel immense pressure to, not
Mm.
pressure, but responsibility to, or at least I do. I'm researching how women access abortion care. And so when
Yeah.
people, these women tell me their stories, I feel like there is so
Mm.
much trust there. There's so much
Hmm.
sort of I have so much responsibility to do something really positive and impactful
Yep.
with this research. Yeah, I think a lot of us are probably working in similar advocacies. A lot of us are probably inspired by that sort of advocacy. So,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think having the confidence to say yes to those
Mm,
opportunities when they come and believing in yourself, it does take a while, as you probably know, like you doing the research. I knew that doing a PhD meant that I would be an expert in something at the end, but I didn't
mm,
ever expect that people would start considering me an expert very early on because I was one of the only people that's like even looking at this topic. So I've been across the literature and I know I'm I, I'm connected both here in Australia and overseas now because I've taken every opportunity. I've said yes to
mm,
connection opportunities and collaboration opportunities. And I must stress too that all of that comes at a personal cost, like financially too, because it's not like you're funded for these things. You do these things because you care, because you're an advocate at heart, and but it does actually reap dividends in the end.
mm.
The job opportunities and through those connections are there when you need them. It's not why I did it, but I know I'm not concerned that I'm going to be unemployable at the end of my PhD, which I think a lot of people are. And I speak to
Yeah.
other PhD candidates that go, I don't even know what I'm going to be qualified for at the end of this. The
Mm,
job market's terrible, particularly people who might be a little bit more mature, like me, in their stage of career, saying, what am I going to do with this? I have none of those questions. And I feel like my research is not even just confined to this particular topic because these gendered issues that I'm exploring apply in education, they apply in parliament and politics, they apply in business. Any large institution, particularly in Australia, has a gendered aspect to it. And these principles of understanding that sociology offers are transferable across
mm.
other areas. So I feel like it's just opened up so many doors to me.
Yeah, I love what you said about not taking opportunities, and I think it really speaks to how a lot of there's a bit of imposter syndrome, I think, sometimes that comes about and you think, oh, like you don't think you know as much as you do, but you do.
Yeah,
You're the only person who sits behind the computer and researches that all day. I think there is a lot to be said for actually believing in ourselves as
yeah.
postgraduate students, as researchers, and saying, these opportunities are mine to take.
Yeah, and I do have something of value to offer in this space.
Mm,
And that these people who are asking me for my opinion are not throwing me a pity bone. They're
yeah.
literally recognizing the expertise that I've demonstrated, and so they're asking my opinion for a reason. So giving them the information or collaborating with them on a project or, you know, reviewing a report or whatever it is that you get asked to do is all well, for me, it helps me have a broader understanding of the issues that I'm writing about because I'm exposed to so much more information. And it also keeps me connected in the space, but it also is like real world impact right now.
Mm,
I don't have to wait, 3, 4 years down the track to finish your PhD and then to write a paper that somebody, decides to do something in policy about. I'm connected to the women veterans strategy of the Department of Veterans Affairs now, and I'm called an expert advisor, so that opportunity doesn't come to just everyone. Like I think we're uniquely positioned in sociology to offer this kind of advice as
mm.
well early on. Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous. That's really great. I wonder if you'd like to tell us a bit about, and this wasn't one of the questions I gave you, so I hope this doesn't throw you through a loop. But I wonder if you'd like to talk about a little bit about some of those like real world sort of impacts that you've seen through your work or like contributions that you feel like you've made through your work or
Well, actually, it does come back to the application
mm,
because I think one of the great things about applying for this award was I had to catalogue all the things that I'd been doing, and I had to write them down and think about them in terms of whether they had impact or not. Because if I'm just tapping into the award criteria just a little bit, it's not about just listing a whole lot of activities. You actually have to be able to link with evidence how that made a difference. So by going through that exercise of saying, well, what have I done? I presented I presented um, at a conference in the UK. What was the result of that? Did it change anything? Yeah, actually, I was invited to join some international research groups. I became part of an international collaboration in this space as a direct result of that. I also was able to network and join other people. And then as a result of that, this happened, X, Y, Z
mm,
happened. And so um, I think uh, the impact was all the things I actually probably didn't even realize how much impact that had until I sat down and started writing it for this application. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm actually doing it now. I don't need the honorific to change. I don't need the piece of paper because I'm doing good quality work and people see that, they appreciate it, and they invite me to be part of the conversation and it's making change. You know, um, yeah. Did that answer the question?
yeah. No, I think that's a really great point and something that I'd sort of like to put to anyone sort of watching the recording is that I think maybe this award is a really great opportunity to sit and have a think about what
Mm,
are those impacts that you don't necessarily realize you're having. And I think it can be a really good practice and a really strong sort of really affirming to go through and look back and actually say, these things that I'm doing have impact and they have meaning and I'm not just, we are all making impact, I think.
yeah.
It's a good
Yeah.
practice to say, to sit down and actually list that impact. Um,
100%. And so when you actually look at the Boyer scholarship categories as well, when you look at the definitions of those, it's actually not that hard. Well, I think what I wanted to say, if I'm not jumping ahead too far, I did want to actually say it's easy to get tricked into thinking that your work is sorry, I'm just going to look at my notes for this.
yeah.
So discovery, integration, application, and teaching. So I put my application in under integration, but really it could have gone under discovery or application. And I think application is probably the one where a lot of people think, oh, well, that's what I'm doing. I fit into under that category. But when you really interrogate what you're doing um, and look at the criteria in detail, you might find that you're actually doing something a little bit different to what you thought you were doing. And so I ended up sort of finding that my work aligned with the integration, which is not what I originally expected. And I think, yeah, outlining who I was interacting with, what I was doing. And just to be clear, I I won the award based on doing a lot of different stuff, but that isn't necessary for this award. The winner from the year before had one major project that she had done with, tangible impact. You don't need to have done a lot of things. You just need to be able to show that you've had impact in one space and align it with the Boyer scholarship. And it's one piece of impact is impact, right? You don't have
Mm,
to have done a lot of different things. I've just been fortunate that I'm positioned that way. So I was able to do though, and some of those things were small, some of those things were bigger. And one of the other things that I probably should mention is when the federal government changed uh, the research training program scholarships, in 2022 and introduced the internship model of scholarship. I was one of the first not the first, but I was in the first cohort of students in the humanities at my university that got one of those scholarships. So for me and anyone else out there who is under one of those scholarships, part of the requirement of that scholarship is to do an internship. And for humanities, that can actually be quite difficult. But what happened was by negotiating my scholarship, I was doing impact. In even that impact alone is enough to position you to be able to apply for this award. If you've done an internship where you've done either a separate project or you've partnered with someone and collaborated with someone as part of that scholarship criteria, you've got evidence right there that you've done something that's had, hopefully had impact. So I was lucky. My internship was with a not-for-profit veteran support service, and what they had me do was give them a report on uh, how to better support women veterans. So understanding their needs and understanding what might be barriers to support through the traditional ex-service organisation pathways. So I did a report for them drawn from some of my data, and was able to present to them. And as a result of what I did, I was able to then come back to them and say, what changes did this report, and I did a presentation to the board and so on. And they were able to say, well, we went from no women on our board to 3 out of 8 board members being women.
Oh,
So that was just right there. That was one
yeah.
tangible change. And they'd been trying to find ways to do that. And then they were
Mm,
able to say, well, we've also changed some of the language on our website. We've changed the imagery on our website because all those things were things that they, it's not really on their radar, because of their worldview and all the things that we understand as sociologists that mean that men don't see this stuff as a problem. You've got to point it out to them. And
yeah.
they were willing to make those changes. So those were really tangible changes. So anyone who's done an internship as part of their scholarship requirements has probably done something that they can point to a result
Mm.
that will probably position them in order to be able to also show that they've had real world impact from their research.
Yeah, fantastic. And for anyone watching the recording, like I would also like to say what a great sort of asset doing an internship is. I know for me it felt like before having done an internship, I felt like what can I do with this work? What is the impact? How do I apply this? How can I turn some of these skills into actual, like something that is actual, that is tangible, and doing an internship really, helped visualize those things for me. So I think it's a really invaluable experience, to be able to sort of see those outcomes and put two and two together. And yeah, it really, really is a great opportunity.
I will
Um,
confess, if it's all right,
yeah.
Brooklyn, that at my university, trying to find or source an appropriate scholarship for humanities was actually quite problematic.
Mm,
Like a lot of universities, University of Newcastle has a strong emphasis on STEM areas, and there were lots and lots of um, STEM style or internships advertised for STEM
yeah.
students, and almost nothing for humanities students. I did have to go out and sort of find my own, and that can be quite challenging for people, but it can be done. And I just want to put it out there and say it doesn't have to be um, a separate project that someone's advertising that they're going to pay you to do. You can actually structure your bigger research project to incorporate using some of the data that you're already collecting to, do a literature review for an NGO, or, do a project like I did, collaborating with an organisation to provide a report and some information that they can then take into their organisation and make policy changes or procedural changes. It doesn't have to be something very formal. Or it does have to be formal in
Yeah.
terms for the university through the contracts, but it doesn't have to be formally advertised, is what I mean. I
Yeah.
think there's an idea out there that it's got to be some glamorous, I think that's the influence of a lot of STEM stuff, that you're going to get some big multinational saying, yes, let's come in, you're going to do this really clear cut 3 month, however many days a week internship. It doesn't always look like that. And I think when we are doing advocacy and working in this space, we know the organisations that are going to value our input, and we can go to them confidently and approach them and say, would you be interested in having a conversation about a collaboration? And this is what it might look like. My university will provide the paperwork and so on. But and that's one way to have really tangible, applied research impact early on
Mm.
in your academic career as well.
Yeah, and that's a really great point as well. I did, have to seek out an
Mm,
organization who would have me. It certainly isn't as glamorous as some of the STEM
no,
opportunities. Um, and it doesn't always come with as much sort of thanks or as much, monetary return, but I think there's a great benefit in doing it. You build relationships as well.
yeah,
Yeah, it's really fruitful, I think. Um, Great. I wonder now if we want to talk a little bit about your application and if you want
yeah,
to sort of, yeah,
sure. So I have got some notes because I'm not good at remembering
yeah.
anything. So excuse me if I look at my notes because I did want to sort of explain some of the things. So we've talked about the Boyer model. So understanding that, looking at the detail of the different scholarships. And understanding where your research fits in that is really good. There's lots of information out there. I think the website has links to lots of stuff about the criteria. Um, I want to talk about evidence because I think evidence is what you need. You need to be able to provide the evidence of that action. And so when it came to conference presentations, it's not that hard, I guess. I just provided, a copy of the program where I was listed with um, my presentation topic and so on. But what I did was where it came to collaborations and relationships with things like partners and policy departments and things, I did ask for letters of support. And I think that's something that people often feel unsure about asking for. So I just wanted to give you an example of how I went about doing that because in my experience, people really want to support you. People that you've collaborated with and who value your work, they do really want to support you, but they're really busy people and they don't always have time. And they certainly probably don't have time to look up the criteria for the TASA award. Remember, look through their calendar about what dates you might have done some collaborating with them and what project that was on. So if you can make their job easier, they are usually really quick to respond in a very positive way. So what I did was I did all that research for them. I sent them in the emails, I sent them a link to the website. I sent them a nicely worded email asking them exactly what I wanted. And I sent them a letter that they could edit that had the basic guts of what we needed for the evidence. So I can share that on screen
Yeah,
if
that
you
would be
want.
fantastic.
So I've got the just one example of each of those. I'm just going to share screen. Where are we? And I'm just going to move my camera stuff over here so I can actually, now where am I? Get the right screen. This one. There we go. So you should be able to see, I haven't de-identified this, but you should be
Yep.
able to see, this was the draft letter that I sent to the First Assistant Secretary who I was working with on the gender strategy. I am still working with on the gender strategy. So I used her full title. I made sure that it had the role that she was in, the role that I was in, what I was asking her for, what we'd done together, and I put it all in the letter. Therefore, on a plain Word document, so that she could add her proper signature and letterhead, which is what's required for a support letter. So just saying, this is how we came to be working together, what we did together when we did it, and what the impact of that was, because obviously this is an evidence support for evidence. Uh, and then if I can just go to the next one, then I sent that in an email saying, this is why what I'm asking you. I'm nominating for this award. I'm hoping you might feel comfortable providing a letter of support. I'd appreciate if you could detail, the ways my engagement has impacted or influenced activities. And to assist you, I've drafted a letter and here's a link if you want to follow up and check. Check that I'm not making this stuff up. But this is so that they could go and look for themselves. I gave them a definite date that I needed to have it back by. I think that's always a good guidance for busy people so they can prioritize things. And obviously, don't hesitate to contact me if you need any assistance with that. So I've given them instructions there. Once you're happy with the content after you've edited it, however you like, it's much easier to edit something on a page than it is to write it from scratch. They make minor adjustments to it. They put a signature and a corporate letterhead on it and then send it back to me. And 9 times out of 10, I didn't have to chase anyone for the letters and they came back unedited in most cases because I had been pretty specific about what we'd done together. So that's what I would recommend. If you're, don't be shy about asking people for a letter of support, make it easy for them, give them the guidelines, and they will just be delighted to support you because that's what most people that we're collaborating with in this space want to do. They want to see you succeed and they want, they're happy to do something to enable that. So then what I did was put my nomination letter together and there is a word restriction on the nomination letter, and I had to actually ask for some leeway on that because not because of the wording of the letter, but because I listed all the things on my letter. So I set out a really clear letter to the assessment panel explaining who I was, what I'm doing, why it's important, and then what my demonstrated engagement and impact was. So that's where I ran out of words because I'd actually done quite a lot when it turned out when I sat down and wrote about it. And I could have left some of that stuff off. I could have just put a couple of things, but
Mm.
imposter syndrome, I felt like I had to tell them everything.
It's not a bad
Um,
problem to have.
well, and also it really helped me to sort of think, why have I felt so busy? Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So I put my internship there because that was very clear. So I just put a little summary and of each demonstrated example of engagement and impact. And I put like a little heading. So there was industry collaboration, there was policy engagement, international research networks, leadership in veteran advocacy, some applied research contributions, which are admittedly very small, but still there. I did some rural and remote veteran support with another organisation. I did quite a lot of conference presentations and some public engagement. So I explained all that and addressed the criteria on the website in this letter as well. So there are some things that they ask you to say. And then at the end, you need to have a very clear guidance of where all this information can be found. So, and I did number it all appropriately. I mean, if you didn't do all that, I'm sure they'd find it. But if you can make it easy for the panel as well to be able to find all your information, I just think that's a nice thing to do. So I just numbered all the supporting documentation and listed it there so that they knew exactly what they should have in my application. Then I bound it all up in a single PDF. And then I compressed it because it was too big to send um, and send it through for assessment. So is there anything that you want to ask me about any of that before I close the share screen?
Um, I can't think of anything. That was really thorough. Thank you. I think that's yeah, a really good idea of what is sort of being asked of um in the nomination process and yeah, a really clear application. I like it.
And I think like looking at these headings here, if you ask yourself, have I done some industry collaboration? Have I had, not everyone gets an opportunity to have policy engagement or impact. Um, what other research networks have you connected with, and what's been the outcome of that? Are you doing some advocacy work in your particular discipline? Have you done some support work? Did you do a conference presentation? Any of these things, when you start to think about it, a lot of us are doing all this stuff in our work, in our normal PhD stuff. Not everyone
Mhm.
has the opportunity to do all of these things, but most of us are doing at least some of these things.
Yeah.
So I just thought if you see it laid out like that, then you might be able to look at your own research if you're thinking about applying for this award and think, oh, yeah, well, I'm doing that. I am doing that. I just really hadn't thought about it this way. And who am I doing that with? Oh, yeah, would that person be willing to give me a letter to support my application? And like I said, most people are really happy to try and help, particularly when us poor students are doing most of this stuff for free, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. You do sort of have to make it easy for people, especially when you're contacting busy people. You
Yeah,
do really have to make it easy.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I really do want to re-emphasize that point that I think a lot of us are engaging with,
Mm,
a lot of us are doing impact and engagement just built into our research. We don't realize it. I think, this is a really great opportunity to sort of back yourself and to say,
mm,
actually, look at all this research activity I am doing. It is impact and engagement.
mm.
Um, that's, what I would
That's
say
right.
to anyone considering it is to just, really think about what you have done and
Yeah.
reframe it.
That's right. And of course, as part of the criteria, you do need to have a support letter from your primary supervisor. Um, so my other point would be make sure you give these people enough time.
Mm,
Busy people, especially supervisors with huge academic loads and so on, they need to have time to be able to um, uh, respond
yeah.
and respond appropriately. So my supervisor didn't need me to write the letter for her. Obviously, she was able to. I didn't do that, but I did give her plenty of notice and for the request and let her know the summary of what I've been doing because she's also got lots of other people that she's supervising and she's not across everything that I'm doing that isn't directly related to my writing. And so I did make sure that she knew that she was supporting a pretty robust application when she was writing her cover letter, to support the application. So don't forget to ask your supervisor, and don't assume that they know what you're doing. That would be
Yep.
my other piece of advice because
Mm,
they they don't remember everything. They can't possibly remember everything, and
yep.
they don't mind. Again, make it easy for them. Give them all the information so that they can then do their thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, that is really fantastic, really helpful stuff, Natalie. And, you know, I want to reiterate that I'm really looking forward to reading the applications this year. And I really do encourage people to apply. I think you do get a complimentary
Mm,
registration to TASA this year, to the TASA conference this year, which is a fantastic opportunity. I think it's going to be a really great conference this year. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. And thank you for joining us, Natalie. I think we'll probably wrap it up here since we don't have any questions from the room. But yeah, thank you again.
Thanks for having me, Brooklyn, and thanks for the opportunity to share all this. And oh, you do actually get a very nice little award, by the way, if
Oh,
you win,
yes.
which was a surprise to me. I didn't actually realize I got a trophy, my first ever trophy, so I feel quite,
Yes,
chuffed about
exactly.
that.
And who doesn't want a
Who
trophy?
doesn't want a
Everyone wants a
trophy?
trophy.
That's right.
Yeah, it's great. It's
It is
excellent.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.